Guys, how are you doing? This is Val Njoroge from Africa's Pocket, and we are a personal finance company that teaches you how to build the life you want by building tools and courses that help you make good financial decisions. And today I want to talk about one of the debates that we've had for a long time. Should you buy or should you rent? It's a question that we're asked all the time. It's a question that has never really been answered. Like, people don't really agree on it. There are usually two camps of people. And I'll save my camp for the end of this video. But what I'd like to do is just think through the financial implications of each decision. And I want to start with buying. So buying is this thing that you're kind of always aspiring to. From when you're a small child, you're thinking about your dream house and how it's going to look. And when you visit people, you're like, oh, their house is so nice, nini. So it really becomes a big part of our aspirations, especially depending on the culture you come from. And therefore, you find that when people buy or even build their houses, which is, one of the major arguments that people say, they're like, you shouldn't buy, you should just build. But generally speaking, owning the home where you live tends to be a pretty subpar financial decision. You end up deciding on fixtures, on locations, on finishes that are not necessarily financially sound because you like them, which is okay because where you live is not necessarily an entirely financial decision. But that's one thing to note. Whenever you build or buy your home, you'll tend to make, not the best financial decisions, and yet this is a huge chunk of money. The second thing you want to think about when you buy is the maintenance cost. And this is something that comes up really often, but people don't quite understand the gravity of how much these maintenance costs could be. So let's say that you own your home for about, 20, 25 years. It means that over a 25-year span, you'll probably replace every single thing in the house. And so over the course of ownership, you probably end up spending twice as much as the purchase price of the house, or even a little bit more. And, typically when you buy or build a house that you live in, you want to pass it down. So there's no financial return that you'll ever get from these maintenance costs that you pay. The other major cost that you've got to pay is insurance. Insurance on homes is expensive. It's high. It keeps getting higher as your house gets more valuable. And so this is a cost that will keep adding on and on as you keep going. And then finally, you've got to think about the tax implications of owning a home. So this increases your net worth. And in some countries, some cities, it changes the way that you pay tax. So when you're buying or building a home, take all of these things into consideration. The biggest cost of all of building or buying a home is the financing cost. The reason why I wanted to talk about it last is because not everybody finances their home, which means that this cost is not relevant to everybody. But if you're taking a mortgage, you really want to be careful about when you actually break even, when you yourself actually own more of the home than the bank owns, or when you become a full owner of your home. It typically takes quite a while. Most mortgages are between 15 and 30 years. So you can imagine that you're paying for 15 to 30 years and you don't even own this asset. So how different is that actually from renting, except that you get an asset at the end of the day? Now for me, I find that buying is such a huge financial undertaking. It really locks up a lot of your cash. And I find that most of the time there's a better investment opportunity out there that can give me a better return than buying the home I own. But let's talk about rent and what are the costs that come with rent. So there's a lack of security that a lot of people associate with renting. One day your landlord can wake up and be like, get out of here. I'm selling the house. I'm no longer the landlord. You need to leave. Or I want to live in this house now, so you need to leave. You're not secure. It's not your home. And then, of course, you can't change it to be exactly the way you want, which is something that a lot of us aspire to. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you want your house with a fountain, with a garden, with the beautiful trees outside, which is not usually an option when you rent. And then there's, sort of a lack of prestige and status that comes with being a lifelong renter. One of the things that creates a milestone for you in life is that day when you're like, yeah, I own my home now. So those are the disadvantages of renting. But I have to say that when I think about renting, I find it to be such a superior option to buying because you can move when you want. It means that you can live in different cities whenever you want. You're not thinking about maintenance costs at all. If anything happens in my house and I'm renting it, I just call the landlord. It's his problem. I don't have to think about it. And then the cost of deposits is usually so low that I can, most of the time, think about the ROI of having a space that I love and are able to modify, cosmetically to my standards and give up the deposit. It might be something that you actually put into your calculations early on. And then when you actually think about the financial decisions, if you're thinking about this purely as a financial decision and not as a factor of happiness and prestige and status, then let me give an example. So let's say that you wanted to buy a house that costs 20 million shillings. And you actually have the cash with you. So let's say you're even constructing it, and so you've bought the land, you've bought the material, so you actually have cash. So 20 million shillings. You put it into the bank, and it earns 10% per year. That means you're making 2 million shillings in interest every year. And if you divide that by 12, that's about 140,000. Now let me ask you, where in Nairobi can't you live when you're renting for 140,000? And the best thing is that, yes, you're paying the rent. However, your 20 million is not tied up. And it is earning this interest that can allow you to live where you want. And you can leave whenever you want. Now, this example is not perfect. It doesn't take into account tax. It doesn't take into account inflation. It doesn't take into account the appreciation of the house. But that's just a quick mathematical equation to get you thinking about whether buying is really the best option. So I think you guys know by now I'm team rent. I think that the flexibility that it gives, the freedom that it gives, and the lack of capital that it takes, for me, is a superior financial decision. However, there are some things that I would think about, like security. If I want to have memories with my children in the same house, or if the only way to live in a particular area was to buy, then I would consider it. But I think for me, the conclusion here is that I would not think about buying my residential home as purely a financial decision. Because when you do the math, renting is a cheaper option in the long run. Let me know what you think in the comments, and keep tuned for more content like this.